Hi, friends. It's Jenn, your Chief Badassery Officer. Welcome to the Art of Badassery Podcast. And today I have a very special guest and new friend for you for this special episode, Tanya Memme. Welcome to the Art of Badassery Podcast.
Thanks, Jenn. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited you're here. Some of you may recognize Tanya already. If you're not familiar with Tanya just yet, Tanya Memme is an acclaimed award-winning TV host, executive producer, former Miss World Canada, keynote speaker, and transformational coach. With a dynamic career history that includes 9 TV series, 50 plus commercials and infomercials, red carpet interviews from the Grammys, Emmys, People's Choice Awards, and numerous celebrity interviews. Tanya's the star of the hit show Sell This House and Sell This House Extreme, currently airing on A&E Network, that my mother watches you every night, by the way. I'll call her and she'll say, "Oh, I'm watching Tanya now." Tanya has guided the sale of over 500 homes on TV worldwide, and she is the executive producer and star of Smart Home Nation. My goodness, what an impressive bio you have.
Thanks, Jenn.
Okay, Tanya's also my new friend. So
yes,
I'm super grateful. Tanya and I met through an organization called International Association of Women. We're on the board of the Los Angeles chapter. So if you're listening and in the area, reach out because we have some exciting events that we plan monthly. Besides that, I get to know her on a personal basis. So I feel very fortunate and now get to share her with you. So Tanya, before we get into the art of badassery and really sharing your badassery with us, and for those of you, this is still season 1. So I'm just going to be repeating this every episode. To me, a badass is someone who has overcome major obstacles, major challenges, develops that inner strength, that badassery, and then shares it with others. So obviously when I was curating season 1, you came out, on top of the list because I was dying to share your badassery with everyone. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you started this amazing, crazy career.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm born and raised in Canada. And I would say back in the day, there was no other way to really get in front of, I knew that I wanted to be an actress I started off as a dancer, but I knew I wanted to get into the entertainment business somehow, but I was born in like a tiny, small farming town. So it's like weird in Niagara Falls, Ontario.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. In a small town called Wainfleet, Ontario. And I grew up on a sod farm. So I grew up on 400 acres of sod, like grass. So I didn't even have neighbors except for my cousins. We're all Italian. And so it's like, where do you begin and I don't know why I wanted to be an actress. That's a whole other thing. I realized when I got older, but then, so
what did you realize? Wait, that's important. What did you realize when you got older?
Well, I realized why I actually got into this business, from the beginning, but I didn't realize that until I was older.
Can you share?
Oh, okay. So
that's an important thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that people are drawn to this business for a variety of reasons, but you have to ask yourself, why am I drawn to the entertainment business? Like, why do I actually want to be on television, or why do I need to be in front of hundreds of thousands of people? Like, what is that? And I had realized that, my father, when I was little, he worked really, really hard. He was an immigrant from Italy, and I really didn't have much of a relationship with him before I was 16. Well, actually more towards 18. And it was when I started winning pageants that I started to sort of get my father's attention. Because, and I think it's, I was raised in an Italian family where the girls had their place. I was cooking and cleaning at a young age, constantly,
I get it.
Right? And I was doing a lot of the housework and waiting hand and foot. Basically, I felt at some points in my life on my brothers and my dad, and it was, but it was okay. It was just what was expected. But I realized that I wanted to do more and I wanted to be more. And then when I started winning some of the pageants and stuff, I had won Miss Niagara and then I won Miss Canada. I started to get some notoriety in the city and the town and the country and from my dad. And I think that that's ultimately why I ended up wanting to become an actress. because
Wow.
it affects you on a subconscious level, and you don't really realize that until years later. And you're like, why did I put myself through all of this?
Exactly. Such hard work dealing with tons of rejection and all that kind of stuff. It's hard. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And then I went to university and I got my business degree and I minored in theater. And then when I won Miss Canada, I left 3.5 months before graduating. And so I always thought I'd go back, but I didn't actually get to go back. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Crazy. And then I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy and studied in New York City for 3 years. Awesome. And so I did a few like off Broadway shows and I auditioned for Broadway, but I was never really a great, amazing dancer or singer. Good actress, but you know, you got to be all three, right? So I was strong in the acting department, not in the other two. And then I started to get commercials. And that's when I started to know that, okay, well, I started to get commercials and then hosting gigs and this and that and acting gigs. And so then that's what ended up bringing me out to Los Angeles.
Where it's paved with gold. The streets are paved with gold here.
Yeah. I mean, I did have work for me here when I moved out here. When I was in New York, I was really pounding the pavement pretty hard. It was tough. Yeah. Lots of very difficult trying to survive. I was, I wasn't even legal at first. I had my student visa and then that ran out. And so I was working under the table for 4 or 5 years, just trying to make money, make ends meet. I moved 15 times in, I think 7 years living in Manhattan because I couldn't put my name on a lease. So I sublet it. So, I mean, those stories go on, but yeah, it was pretty, those years were pretty tough, but that's what it is. That's what you do when you're in your 20s. You rough it out and you want to make it, you work hard.
Especially when you have a dream, a North Star, something pulling you forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't want to go back and I didn't have a plan B. And I had drive and tenacity that was like no other. And I wouldn't say I was ever the best at anything I did, but I was definitely one of the most tenacious.
Tenacity. I love that. A word, I don't know, I don't use that often, but when I hear it, I'm like, yes, tenacity is what it takes. Yeah. I feel that now in my life.
Yeah, I'm sure. Especially because you're a speaker now. So it's, you have to have tenacity to book those jobs and get those gigs and keep updating all your material, marketing yourself. It's a lot. Over
and over. And like I said, while facing rejection, etc., I just got an email before I got on this call that some pharma company went with another speaker. And it's like, that like moment of, okay, let me just pull this knife out of my chest and like refocus because I'm about to do something even better, right? Something for others in this podcast. So talk to us about kind of dealing, like what were some of your biggest challenges? And I'm sure they were different over the different decades that you were doing this, right?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So, oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, there was a few, but I mean, I think my biggest challenge overall in my business, I had a few years there. There was about a 10-year span where felt like I was on top of the world. I was being offered every job. I was auditioning for like Dancing with the Stars, which I came second choice, right behind. Yeah. It was between me and Samantha Harris and she got the job.
Oh man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a lot as the host.
Oh,
yeah. Well,
amazing.
As the co-host. Cause
right.
I auditioned for like Shark Tank originally when they first started the show. They were looking for hosts and now they don't have hosts, but like all the big shows. And I was, I remember one year I had 33 days off. The whole year I was hosting like 5 shows. I was traveling all over the world. It was a lot. And I was on A&E I was on 2 shows on A&E. I was hosting Entertainment Tonight Canada. I was doing all the red carpet events. And I was dating Michael Keaton, which I don't talk about very often. I dated him for 3 years. So like
I got the inside scoop.
Yeah, but between the schedule like that, it was pretty insane,
Yeah.
But it was awesome.
That of your life? Like what age range was that decade?
That was in my 30s.
Okay.
Pretty much because I hit Sell This House when I was 29.
Okay.
And then until about 40, those 10 years were my very, the stars on the rise, and it was wild. And I was living the Hollywood lifestyle. It was great. At least I was exhausted and tired, but I loved it. I definitely loved it.
Good. That's good to hear that you loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot about it I loved. But there's also a lot that I wasn't connected to about myself. You know, you just kind of like keep steamrolling ahead because it is what it is. And so I would say one of the biggest challenges for me was just keeping my integrity in check, that I wasn't, you know, I navigated so many different types of scenarios and personalities. And that was probably the hardest thing, was keeping my integrity.
Can you just say more about integrity in general and bumping up against not being in integrity?
Well, you know, there's different ways you can get to the top.
Say more.
Let's just be honest. And I was just not one of those girls, you know, I just wasn't. And so there were many, many, many offers and scenarios I had gotten myself into, which ultimately, you know, in a way, I think sort of took me down in a way too, because I just really wanted to stick to my integrity through the whole ups and downs. You know, I got myself into a couple of when I was young and naive and, you know, I got myself into some pretty crazy scenarios. Yeah.
Would you like to share an example? Like,
okay. Well, I can't name names.
Sure. Of course.
This person I'm about to talk about, this is just for anyone that's wanting to get into the business, that is young and naive. So I won Miss Canada, and I didn't really have any relationships with any celebrities or anything like that. But the host of the Miss Canada competition, the year I was in it, was somebody that I had started. I was writing letters, you know, because we didn't have emails then. And so I was keeping in touch and back and forth. And then I was at the Miss World pageant, and there were common people that we knew at the Miss World pageant. And then I kept writing, you know, to him. And so anyways, we were in New York, we were in Manhattan, and we went to go see it was a Kings game. I didn't go see the game, but there was a big, huge party for the Kings afterwards in Manhattan. And I went and I met him at the hotel. And then he asked me to come up to the room to drop off my purse and my coat, but I didn't know that at the time. So I was like, oh, okay. So I dropped off my purse, dropped off my coat.
Yeah.
And in the room, there was like a table set with like, you know, 2 little glasses, and there was roses, and it was like this little quaint atmosphere.
Planned ahead.
Yeah, it was all planned ahead. It was all set up and everything. And I didn't really know what to say. And I'm sitting there, and I didn't know. I don't even barely remember the conversation, because this happened a long time ago, but I was very, very nervous. And then we go down and we go across the street to this party to go see the Kings team players. And then kind of closer to the night, I realized that I didn't have my purse or my coat. So I had to go back up there. So he said to me, just stay here. I'm going to go and call my wife. I said, great, I'll stay here. And so I was sitting with his friend, and I asked his friend to walk me back in about an hour. He said, come back in an hour up to the room. So I went up to the room, and he opened up the door, and his friend saw him in his bathrobe, and it was kind of open. And he just grabbed me into the room, and we had a little wrestling match on the bed. And I finally got my feet from under him and threw him off the bed and ran out, grabbed my purse and my thing and ran out. And he continuously tried to get a hold of me for like about a year later.
Even after you ran away from this man.
Well, I think he was afraid that I was going to do something or sue him, or I was too young and naive, and I didn't have my citizenship. I was still trying to get my green, my working visas, and I'm not that kind of a person that's going to go sue anyways, but I just mean, and I was young and I was new and I was trying to make it. Like, I don't want to start off in Hollywood like this, but so you get yourself into situations like that when you don't pick up on the, and that's one of a few situations I had gotten myself into that I just didn't see.
Sure.
I didn't see the train coming towards me at the time. So, and this is the very first time that I've actually talked about that situation.
Oh yeah.
So,
it sounds exactly like one of the Harvey Weinstein stories that I've heard before. Opens up the door, he's in his bathrobe. It's like the same thing. These guys have like the same game book almost,
Like, I mean, I don't know. I just, at the time, just being a woman when I was at the height, especially in my 30s, I just thought, well, that's a part of being a woman. Like I just kept going and kept moving forward. And, there was, especially in our generation, like I'm older than you, but there's this acceptance that was
Not by
back in
much.
the day, but there's this acceptance that we were just meant to have to accept. I look back and I have had a lot of that to deal with, and I had to heal from that. In the past 5 years, I've really been going through my own self deep dive healing from all of that. And
I definitely want to hear how, because a lot of the art of badassery is not just like, oh, I overcame it or she overcame this challenge, but actually I want to know how, because the tactical, the techniques, how people overcome challenges, to me is the story. Like, that's the juice. But also I just, this conversation is in my head. I keep thinking of questions about the Me Too movement. And so prior to the Me Too movement, this stuff happened all the time, and I'm sure it still does, but it wasn't talked about. So how do you feel overall about the movement? Are you happy it happened? Are you, can you kind of see both sides? Like, what's going on in your mind? I'm sure you're having flashbacks to all these different stories that you lived through. I think we all did. But yeah, tell me more about.
I mean, that is a really tough question. And I don't want to get myself in trouble I'm just going to stand in my own truth though.
Sure.
And because I have dealt with it to a very large degree through my career. And it's one of those things where like, I was never the kind of person to, I don't know. I do feel like there is a healthy sense of flirting between a man and a woman in general. Mm-hmm. There's a healthy sense of it. There's a playful sense of it. I do not have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. I've also had things happen where it's like, oh, well, that kind of crossed the line, but it wasn't enough to like pull me down as a human.
Right.
I'm female. Maybe they're attracted. I don't know. There's always this thing, right? Now, does it give them the right? No. Is it right? No. But I'm not the kind of person that's going to go and make it public unless it has. Now, I could have made many scenarios in my past public. I could have brought that to the forefront, but I'm okay. I can deal with my stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? I didn't feel like, now there's women out there that I'm like, wow. I mean, some of these women really went through a lot. I'm sure I went through, I could say equally some of it, but the ones who did have their voice, I think that needed to happen. Mm-hmm. I think it needed to happen. Now, there's some of them that have thrived in Hollywood afterwards, but I would say most of them probably have not, because they did take the hit for other women. Right. So now there's a bit of a balance, but at the same time, now everybody's so afraid to do or say anything in a variety of different areas and topics that it's just very hard to be who you are. I don't know. I think everybody's, walking on eggshells now. Yeah. So I hope that kind of answers it.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Maybe I should have spoken up. It's just, I wasn't in a place in my life where I felt I could. I mean, I've had a knife basically thrown at me from this restaurant that I worked with in Hollywood, a very popular restaurant in Hollywood. He came out because he wanted these two girls. He wanted to give and I was young, and I was very, very like, I always played by the rules, almost too much when I was younger. Yeah. I was working at this high-end restaurant. I was wearing they'd always have these short little skirts and this and that. And these two girls came in and he wanted to give them free food and like free dinner, but it was my tab. And I said, no, it has to be okayed by the manager and the chef and I. And he had supposedly had this like crush on me because I reminded him of his ex-girlfriend who he hated. And so he had this thing for me. He wouldn't give me food on my lunch break. Like, it was this weird dynamic that he and I had. Yeah. And so I didn't give the girls this food, and he came out into the public area, like waving a knife at me, like threatening me. Oh my God. So it's also like, it's not just like sexual harassment. It's also verbal abuse that can be very hard and things like that. And if I had to choose between the two, I can deal more. Like, I can't, like, it's the verbal abuse that really, for some reason, affects, because I can handle myself. Especially now, like if anybody does anything that disrespects me, like it doesn't even happen now because I'm older now, but this was like back when I was younger and naive and my star was on the rise, and I was trying to navigate Hollywood and I didn't understand, and not saying any of it was right. I just was a lot more naive then.
Yeah, no, and I hear you. I think it's pervasive in Hollywood and all industries. And as far as the whole Me Too movement, and I didn't mean to really put you on the spot about that per se, but
yeah, right, Jen. No,
sorry. Yeah. But at least in my opinion, it's like sometimes the pendulum just has to swing, and it has to swing all the way, sometimes even too far, in order to get back to some type of normalcy. Yeah. So I think that's where we were.
I didn't have the guts. Those girls did. I didn't, you know?
And thankfully they did, right?
Yeah.
So now hopefully more women will have, like, they saw that happen and they won't tolerate harassment, assault, etc. Hopefully that's the goal. Friends, if you've been following even for a short amount of time, you know it is my mission in life to help women feel more strong, safe, and powerful from the streets to the boardroom. One of my very favorite products to help you, your daughters, your nieces, and even your aging relatives stay more safe is Invisiwear jewelry. How it works is each product, from bracelets to keychains to necklaces and even scrunchies, all contain an SOS built-in button that connects to an app on your cell phone. From there, if you ever feel in danger, you just hit the button twice and it will send an SOS text with a link to your location to your pre-selected emergency contacts. For a premium subscription, which is optional, for just $11.99 a month, you can then text or speak to an ADT security agent 24/7 on call to help you get the help you need exactly when you need it. So head to invisiwear.com, use code SHEWARRIOR, one word, for 10% off your purchase, and stay safe, my friends. Okay, so going back to these challenges, so you identified sticking to your integrity as a challenge. You also identified having to heal from a lot of that, let's call it small trauma with a little T, just going through, is that okay to say?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it felt like, a little big, more than small trauma. I don't think it was big, but it was definitely not to be diminished, but it was, and I had to heal. No, that's okay. I know what you mean.
It's traumatic and it is trauma for sure. Yes, so you had to heal from this. So tell us more about how you started your healing journey. You mentioned 5 years ago.
Well, what happened really is that I was on a show. I might as well talk about that. I know you know about that, right?
Sure.
So yes. I was on a show, and it was on a pretty big network, and I was one of so many cast members, and it was a talk show, and I loved my job. I was on there with my daughter, but I was in a situation where the executive producer was he was of the Harvey Weinstein days, like that generation, and he was extremely just verbally abusive on set. And I'm the only one that's like willing to talk about it, but it was just one of those things where I was on the show for 4.5 years, and we were all getting obliterated by, this toxicity of his personality. And I couldn't take it. Like, I couldn't thrive. And then I was also in not a great marriage. I was married to a friend instead. It wasn't even really a friend at the time. We're better friends now. But, so I would go home to this marriage that wasn't working. And then I had to go to work where this was like, I was being yelled at too many times. And so I promised myself, I said, look, if I get yelled and screamed at one more time, I have to quit. Because I owe myself that, because I'm worth more than being yelled and screamed at and demeaned in front of everybody on set for no reason. I mean, at work. Yeah. And so it was just one of those things. And so there was one day where, I got yelled and screamed at again. And it all has to do with like setting up a competitive environment. And there's so much to what happened. You know what I mean? There's so much. Yeah. But I walked off set and I wrote the network a letter saying why I didn't turn back. And in making that decision, I'm happy. Like, I'm glad I made the decision, but I paid for it greatly because I was up for other shows after that. And all of a sudden, mysteriously, my screen test was canceled. So, so I paid for it. Like, I really did. And I was out of work.
Blacklisted.
I don't know. I felt that. Is it true? I don't know if it's totally true, but that's,
Mhm.
you know, all I can say is that my screen tests were mysteriously canceled, which has never
Right.
happened before in my whole
Right.
career. And so things like that. And, you know, and then this was during the Me Too movement, and word got around that I think that the network thought I was going to sue. And I think, you know, there was a lot of upheaval there. And this was
Mhm.
like right before the Me Too. This was about 8 months before Me Too movement. So there was no Me Too
Okay.
movement at the time. And so it was very, very difficult. And so I was a single mom. I left my husband too about a few months
wow.
after that. So all within a few months, I left my husband, left my job. I didn't have any work, and I was out of work. I ended up being out of work for almost 7 years.
That's
So
a
it was
lot.
It was a lot, like 5
Yeah.
years really. And that was tough. And I hit my rock bottom, and it was
Mm.
brutal. I realized too that my whole self-identity was attached to my career and my accolades and my awards and all the stuff I had
Right.
been, you know, I worked my bank account even at the time. Right.
Right.
And so I had to really work through like my self-worth and who am I? Who am I in the midst of all this is taken away? Who and what am I? And so that was when I started the path to healing, because I literally fell apart. Like, it was so bad. I was in a 2-bedroom apartment with my daughter. I was on the bottom floor, and it was loud, noisy, dark. And it was like the worst. It's everything you don't want in an apartment. That's what I had, right? And so in a place to live, especially after everything I worked so hard for.
Yes.
You know, they always say, like, don't hang on to the past. Well, I was hanging on to the past because my past was awesome.
Right.
And you know?
Yeah. And it felt like you lost it all. This is, by the way, in chapter 2 of the Art of Badassery is how to bounce back. And it sounds like you made an ultimate comeback. That's like when you completely need to have forced essentially to transform your entire life. You dealt with loss and grief and had to mourn almost your past life, decades of life that you built and your identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was hard. And I did lose all of my money, because what happens is that I've learned a lot when you're in your rock bottom. And I know that you know this, Jen, because your book is incredible and everything you do is incredible. You learned it from your rock bottom too, right? So your moment in the World Trade Center. When you hit your rock bottom, there's a few things that happen. First of all, you feel like you're the only one going through it. Everybody has a different reason why they hit rock bottom, but the pain is all the same. It still hurts, whether somebody loses all their money or somebody loses their whole family. Like, the pain is the same, you know, because they're identifying with it the same. And then also, you learn who your friends are. And there's so many things that I learned by hitting my rock bottom. And, you know, I didn't have too much family reach out. Like,
really?
I don't even know if they knew that I was even going through all of this, because I don't really think anyone really asked or inquired. Okay. And I just kind of went into my cave, and I didn't come out for a long time. And then, you know, and also don't make any good business decisions or any business decisions, because they're not going to be good ones when you're in your rock bottom. Right. And that's how I lost all my money. I trusted all the wrong people. I had someone steal like $100,000, and I've had more than that. I had a business manager that stole a bunch of money. I had everything was just crumbling.
Wow.
Very,
Is there a moment that you remember, sometimes when you're reading a book, which I know you're working on yours now, is there a moment when you say rock bottom that your mind just goes to, or a picture
I was in the Heathrow airport. I was flying to London, and I don't even remember. I think I was going on a trip. I can't remember. I know it wasn't for work. It was a friend of mine who would pay for my ticket, this and that. And at the London Heathrow airport, there's showers there. I literally had a nervous breakdown in the shower, panic attack, whatever you want to call it, but I had fainted in the shower.
Like a panic attack.
Laying on the floor, passed out in a public shower on the floor.
Oh God. Oh gosh.
And I woke up, I don't know how much longer later, and my skin was all I had been in there for a while, and I was like, okay, I gotta figure this out. But I didn't really know how to get out of it. I really didn't know how to get out. No one does. Nobody knows how to get out of their rock bottom. There's no answers. Unless, that's why I'm writing a book in the moment. Yeah.
Right. And just not funny, but anecdotally, I always think of the bathroom floor, and I feel like we've all had those moments like on the bathroom floor, not necessarily in a public bathroom. It's usually like your own bathroom.
Yeah, it was not good.
You know, the fetal position in the bathroom floor, like we've all been there. Okay. So now I know we're going over here, but I would love to just share, like, if you could identify like certain things that really helped you make this ultimate comeback, if you will, or however you want to define it, but you obviously bounced back. What were some of the things that you either did, read, practiced, learned that really helped you make a difference?
Well, I'll tell you that because I can't skip this one part. So after that, my girlfriend who really was there for me, she called me and she said, I have a shaman coming over. She says, I think you need to do ayahuasca. And I was like, well, what's ayahuasca? And this was like a long time ago. I didn't know what it was. No one knew what it was, like most of us. And so I showed up her house and I experienced this ayahuasca ceremony that I didn't even know what I was walking into. Wow. And she was a shaman from Colombia that had come over, and I took a lot of it. I took like 3 cups. If anyone's done it, they'll know that's a lot. And I had the worst and most awful and the most incredible, wild, beautiful experience of my life. It was a 12-hour journey. It was physically and emotionally just brutal. Everything that you don't want to happen with taking plant medicine happened to me because I didn't know what I was doing. Right. And in that journey, I basically felt like it ripped me apart, threw me to pieces, and then put me back together again. Wow. And it told me, it said, and I know this might sound weird, but there is spirit in these, these plant medicines. There is something there that talks to you. And it said to me, use your God-given talents. There's a reason why you're a TV host. There's a reason why you were nominated for Emmys. There's a reason why we've given you this. So start a podcast and interview 100 people that hit rock bottom, and your answers will be there. And then you're going to write a book, and then you're going to go on stage and talk about it. And so I was like, it was very clear. It told me to call it Life Masters, told me everything. It told me a different name, and then I changed it to Life Masters, but it was along the same lines. And it told me stuff about my family, my parents, and this, like lots of stuff. And so the next day I started this podcast. Not the next day. It took me like a week to recover from that. And then I started the podcast.
7 days later, that's still getting into massive action away.
Massive action. Yeah. And I interviewed person after person after person, not getting paid, not making money. I'm still struggling, And then I noticed that after interviewing all these people from around the world with all different stories that didn't know each other, there was about 15, 20 things that were kind of similar. And I'm like, wow, they all did these similar things, like 10 main things really, but there's like really 20, right? But you can kind of interchange it all if you want. And so I started implementing in my own life some of the things that I learned, that this is what my book is all about.
Wow.
And so my book is all about, it's going to be called Rock Bottom. It's all about the roadmap to get out and how I did it. Yeah.
I can't wait to get it.
That's the truth. And I feel weird talking about it sometimes, but that's the truth. That's how I got out, was implementing, these strategies into my own life. And then, 3 months later, I get a call from A&E and they're like, we want to bring your show back and we want to pick up your other show that you're executive producing. And I was back on the air, 2 shows. I met the man of my dreams. I now live in the Palisades. I've got a beautiful house. I don't know. All I can tell you is that is what I did.
Wow. Okay. For those of us, I've never done plant medicine, and I'm just saying yet, because I don't know if it's in my future or not. But for those people out there that maybe won't do it, right?
Yeah.
There was an openness to you. You were open to solutions, and then the right solution for you showed up. Can we say that that's kind of the truth, right? Because I want to give people, like tangible things, and it's like you were ready for a solution. You were ready for help. And your friend.
I was ready. Yeah, you almost had to hit rock bottom so low that you have nothing to lose by doing anything. So it's like, I was willing to try anything at this point. Like literally, I was at the point where I didn't care if I got hit by a car. Like I didn't. Wow. I just it was awful. And my daughter's really one that I was very hopeless. And if I didn't have Ava, I don't know, but she, I knew I had her to live for and stuff. And it was really bad. It was really low, but no, you're right. I always say live a life of curiosity, because it's the curiosity that will, Not every choice makes, is a good choice. Sometimes the cat gets killed, right? But it has 9 lives. And so,
as a cat lover, I don't love that as an analogy, but
me neither. I'm a cat lover too. But you need to want to, not even want, you just have to have that little tiny seed inside that's willing to take the first step and just have that. And if you have that, just go with it and try anything, try things you have never tried, because obviously what you're doing now isn't working.
Right. Oh, I love that. And for some people, right, your message came through plant medicine. Others, it could literally come from your intuition. The answers might already be inside you. They might be nudging you towards things or away from different things. It's like, listen to it, right? I think that's the biggest message I'm getting here.
I am not at all condoning plant medicine. That is a personal choice, right?
Sure.
Like, I'm just saying that's up to anybody. You guys can research it and figure out if it's right for you. But I've interviewed people where it's come through intuition, in a book, in something a stranger has said to them, walking down the street, walking through a forest. It can come to you in a variety of ways. Exciting. Yeah. I mean, it's exciting because you have to be open.
It is. It really is. Okay. So from those, you said there's about 15 different steps that are very clear that kept showing up in all the people that you interviewed about rock bottom and how to bounce back from it. Can you just name, as we wrap up, I just want you to name like your top tip for people that have experienced and right now maybe experiencing their rock bottom.
So I would say the first thing that you need to do is it is your time to be selfish. You have to be selfish. You have to get rid of the friends that don't serve you. The people that don't answer your text messages, the people that make you feel bad, the sarcastic comments. You need to build yourself back up and be selfish with your time, because it's your time. Stop over giving. Stop over being over nice. It's your time to heal. And I didn't care what people thought if I did ayahuasca. Like, you have to be selfish with your time and your choices. And this is you, and really gain your self-respect for yourself by putting yourself first. And whoever doesn't want to fall into that category doesn't have to, but the good ones will always stay. They'll come back around. Even if they're mad at you for a year, who cares? The good ones will always show up again.
Right. They're in my keynote in the book, the setting boundaries is a whole chapter. And I've dug in a little bit, and there are scientific studies that show that people that set healthy boundaries with people, places, and things dragging them down will enhance their own self-esteem, exactly like you just said. So thank you so much for
You're welcome, Jen.
sharing all those stories, for giving us practical tips. And before we close out, I just have a couple rapid fire questions for you. Ready? Okay. First, what was your favorite food when you were a kid?
Hostess Twinkies. If you can believe it. I eat pretty healthy now, but I loved those.
Yep. Name one person, dead or alive, that you'd like to have a drink with. What drink would you have?
It would be my Italian grandmother, my Nonna, and I'd love to have a glass of wine of my grandfather's wine.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite personal development book or author, if you can't think of a book?
My very first one that really affected me greatly was The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Tanya Memme.
Yes. I love it.
And it's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Love it. And your favorite hype song? Something that gets you like hyped up.
Well, when I won Miss Niagara, it was so cute. The song that You're Simply the Best came on. And I think it's by Tina Turner, isn't it? Simply the Best. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that always reminds me of those days when I was just starting to, gain my confidence within myself. Yeah.
I love it. I just got chills. Tanya, thank you so much. Tell everyone where they can follow along so we don't miss it when your book comes out. Where do we follow you on social media?
All over social media. Go to my YouTube page. It's Tanya Memme. I think it's Tanya Memme Official or Tanya Memme, but you'll see it. And then Instagram is Tanya Memme Official. My website, just go to my website, tanyamemme.com. And then all of my social media is there, including my podcast is there. So yes, please sign onto the podcast. Listen to Life Masters. And you'll
listen to Life Masters. I'm on it. It's coming out soon. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanya. Everyone, her links will be in the show notes, but also just make sure that you grab that book, Rock Bottom, when it comes out. I'm so excited for you. And thank you so much for being on here.
You're so welcome. I love you. You're awesome. You're so great. Thanks, Jenn.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure you share this episode with someone who is in their rock bottom.